talking about gender and sexuality. It's kind of like nostalgia coming back for me because I did youth ministry here for like 5-6 years, and so it's just kind of like very nice to be back. But I'm so glad you guys are here in this session, and I know that there's so much content out here right now for gender and sexuality stuff. I'm constantly looking at what's available, and so even on Rooted, I know they just released something. I'm sure Sola has written a lot about both of these things, and I think there's theological things maybe that you have questions about, or really practical, hands-on, on-the-ground stuff. But just to share a little bit, just to set this up, the first time I really was thinking about gender and sexuality stuff, it really wasn't from ministry. It was from like a family context for me. Because, so I'm married, my wife is Jessica, her brother is gay, and he has a partner. And so really early on, I was like, how do I do this? Like, even like while we were dating, I would go to like family gatherings or holidays, and I'm like, man, how do I navigate this conversation? Should I speak up a little bit more? Should I this is a long relationship we're gonna have, and so how do I like kind of play this? And then I had a student actually here a long time ago. I showed up at his graduation, and they called this student by not the name that I knew him by, but they called him another name that was a female name. And I was like, is this a joke? I don't know, what is going on? What's the context of this? And then in my mind, I was like, wait, how do I navigate that? Like, how do I navigate some conversations about sexuality, gender? And honestly, I messed up a lot. A lot. Like, I remember going on trips, and I would go on to camps and retreats or whatever you want to call it. And I remember a student that I knew that I think is gay, but I didn't know, we'd never talked about it. I just had my suspicions, if you know what I'm talking about. And other people would give me conversations and feed me information kind of about that. But we all know that youth pastor thing where somebody talks to you and you have to act like you don't know what they're talking about, you know what I'm saying? So then somebody told me and I'm like, oh, I know everything. But I'm like, oh, really? Right? And so I'm talking to them, talking to this student, and point blank, this is how the conversation starts. Before he actually comes out to me, I think he was trying to figure out if this was safe to talk about. He said, what do you think the Bible says about homosexuality? Just point blank. Is it a sin or not? Am I still loved or not? And I remember I handled it. I knew the theology. I went to Talbot, great school, and I'm sure a lot of you guys went to great schools. But you have the theology, but when somebody that you care about, that you've been walking with for a long time, asks you, you're like, where do I start? And this was I almost wish that I did a practice round, but this was my first time. And then I remember I was like, I knew the truth, but the way that I expressed it was not gracious or loving. And I felt really disappointed in myself after. And I remember thinking, dang, I think I said everything that was true, but I don't know if I shepherded this student well. I don't know if I pastored him really well in this moment. And so I say all this to say, a lot of us might have the doctrine, and if we don't, there's a lot of great resources. But what I'm mostly going to be talking about isn't just, here's the verses, here's the stuff. I'm kind of just sharing my journey, and I'm more coming from the framework of pastoring. So how do we pastor, not just teach? Teaching is a part of it, but how do we pastor somebody through all this? And it's not just a student or an adult. It's there's a lot of stuff going on here, and so I hope that by the end of our time, 2:30 is what I got from you guys. By 2:30, hopefully you'll get some practical things, some encouragement of, man, how do I not just think rightly, but really care for students and do youth ministry well when it comes to this topic. And this is not we don't have it all figured out. I don't have it all figured out. My church is definitely not a perfect church, and you're probably saying yes and amen about your own church too. But as I go through this, I'm just going to share with you what our church did, And I'm sure you can extract some principles from this. And if you guys have questions, we'll do like questions and stuff at the end. But do I use this? Is this right, John? Okay. Oh, look at that. Okay. I also have a 3-month-old daughter. So if some of these things are spelled wrong, please just give some grace to me, okay? Okay, so this is where we start. Position papers on gender and sexuality. So at Mariners, I'm at a church in Irvine. Our senior pastor, every summer, he spends 6 weeks on a study break. It's not vacation. He tells us all the time, I'm not going on vacation. I'm going on study break. His study break is to come back with the upcoming year's entire teaching calendar. And so like we have until 2025, and then when he comes back in June, August, we'll have the end of 2026. And so as he was preparing, he wanted to do this series called On the Table. And so I think the first time we launched that series was 2023. So this was 2 years ago. And he told us, okay, I think down the road, I'm going to be talking about these topics because in that time, it was very heightened. I think it actually died down a little bit now, but it was really heightened. And so he said, I want to teach on this, but I want our whole church to be on the same page. And he's like, I don't know if we're all on the same page. And so it's really hard to teach something, especially as a youth pastor, if you're like, wait, what does my senior pastor think about this? I don't know. What do my elders really think about it? I think generally I know, but what about some of the details? Like, what about pronouns? What about like the desire versus the behavior, or like some of these nuances? Like, man, I don't know where everybody stands. And so his idea was, hey, we need position papers written so that they can be presented to our directional elders, so they can approve this, so we can present it to our shepherding elders, and then we can present it to our pastors and staff. And so we actually wrote position papers as a church. And I actually wrote one of these on spiritual gifts. We have like 9 position papers at our church. It took me like 60 hours to write. And so these people nerd out on this, okay? It's almost like a dissertation. It's a lot of stuff. And I printed out all of these handouts. Man, church ministry, we are killing a lot of trees over here, which I'm totally cool with, all right? And so this is where we're at. So we actually have a book for staff. It's called the Book of Important Stuff, where we have all of our position papers in it. And then at the back end, we have maybe 30 leadership axioms that talk about our philosophy of ministry and how we lead. And so this is like the more ghetto version. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's the more like, this is loose, okay, just pieces of paper. But position papers, we had these made, and there's a few things that flow out of it, but I'll just highlight 2 things in here that I think is really helpful. We want to clarify theology, and so we want all of us to be biblical, not just our church's view, but what we think the biblical view is, and we want this to be in alignment. And so after these position papers were made and edited several rounds, we all, as staff, had to sign off on it. All of our leaders had to sign off on it. Elders have to sign off on it. And people have left our church after we made this because they said, I didn't know that's exactly what we thought about it. And I don't think anybody's surprised. Like, we weren't, I don't think we shocked anybody when these came out. But we did want everybody on the same page because I've even interviewed high school leaders, and I've said to them, hey, you're a really young leader. I just want you to know what our position is on gender and sexuality. And I'll talk it out with them, and they'll say, I don't agree with that. Can I still serve as a leader, though? Like, I still love you. I still love teenagers. Can I still serve? Like, and when it just comes to this, I'll just default to the church. And we're like, I don't think so. Like, for your own integrity. Like, we want leaders who can say things like, hey, this is what I believe in, and I believe this is from the Bible, and so, hey, we're reading these passages, this is where we arrive. Instead of a pastor teaches something, and then afterwards, in small group time, they say, oh yeah, the church says this, but what I really believe is, we don't want any of that. And so alignment for us is super important, and so that's part of the reason why position paper is so helpful, just clarifying with the leadership of your church. And then the second point we have on here is clarity is kindness, which is, I'm sure you guys have heard of websites like churchclarity.com, where people in the LGBT community, they want to know what like what's going on in churches when they visit. And so that website actually gives them a really short, like it's almost like ChatGPT. It's like they just type in a church and then it'll tell them how affirming or how not affirming or whatever, like it gives them the stance. And so we believe, hey, it's helpful for us to talk about it rather than kind of hinting at things like generally. So they kind of get we're conservative, or they kind of get that we're not trying to do that. We're just saying, hey, this is a traditional biblical view of gender and sexuality. We hold to it. This is why. And we believe that's the kindness to them. And also, we've written these position papers. So I have one on gender here. And I think I have one on sexuality here somewhere. But I know there's so many papers here. But we've written these. And we don't put it on our website. And we don't hand it out to people. Because we believe the paper is not how we pastor. It's what we use to pastor people, if that makes sense. So we don't want to just be like, oh, you have questions? Here's this 9-page paper. Go ahead and read it. We don't want that. We want to actually engage in a conversation with them. So we intentionally do not post it on our website. But if anybody asks, we're happy to share and give it away so that people could look at it and study from it. I hope all that makes sense. But this is our starting point. So even before our senior pastor taught on it, these papers were made, and it probably took a few months for it to go through all of these rounds of edits and all that good stuff. Okay, number 2. Then we had staff read through Love Thy Body by Nancy Pearcey and Confronting Christianity by Rebecca McLaughlin. And so not only were we aligned, we signed the leadership commitment, and I have all of these documents up here. I have another copy if you guys wanted to just scan through it, maybe later. I could hand this out to you guys. Or if you guys want hey, you guys have a lot of handouts. I'm not gonna carry around pieces of paper with me, this is too much. If you write your email down somewhere, just on the back of one of these papers, I'm happy to just email you all these resources, so you can have a digital file. If this is going to help you, I'm happy to share. That's all I care about. Open source, okay. And so this part, staff equipped. So we read these 2 books together as an entire church. So our 250, 300, that's how many full-time staff we have at our church. We all read through this book, which was a lot. And so we used our teaching meetings or our staff meetings or whatever. We actually walked through chapters of this book together. And the whole point was this. Some people, like how I just shared, they have very close family and friends who are in this, and they need time to process stuff. I might still have some questions. I think I'm conservative. I think I believe in this, but what about these verses? Or I saw something on TikTok or whatever, and you need to kind of process some of this stuff out. And so this helped us process. It helped us learn. It helped us share. It helped us study. So we were wrestling through a lot of the questions. So that fast forward all the way down to if you're leading a small group with teenagers about gender and sexuality, and maybe they invited their new friends who maybe aren't Christian at all, that small group time could go in a trillion directions, right? It's all over the place. But doing things like this where you're processing it yourself, you're with other staff members, this actually gave us time to see, I think students are going to ask this, or actually some of them already asked this. So some of the big questions kind of boil up already for us, and it gives us more time to align and know kind of where we're pastoring from. And so that was so helpful for us. And then we did this. We told parents, students, volunteers about our teaching plan. So we had all of this stuff, and we gave, in August, we told, we had a packet of everything we're teaching for the rest of the school year. Kind of I got a 3-month-old, I got a 3-year-old. Okay, she goes to a little Christian preschool, okay? And they give us a calendar of the events, right? And so you guys get school calendars, and you guys understand. You see all the big events. There's a daddy-daughter dance on this month, and on that month they have that. And so we thought, hey, let's give a heads up to everybody. So we shared it so that they could see, I know the exact weeks where they're teaching these topics, so people kind of prepare their hearts. And they have an idea that it's coming up, not just for the parents, but also for the students. And they would even come up to me leading into it, because we taught this in January or February, I think. And students would come up to me and they'd be like, are you ready for the big talk? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you got a big talk coming up. You ready for your big talk? And I'm like, totally, sure. But that was great because it gave me a chance to be like, why do you think it's so important, right? Why is this topic so big for you? Like, tell me what you're seeing at schools, and the conversation would start there. So it was great for people to know, because then it's a great resource for you to actually have an idea of what's on their mind and hearts before that. And so parents saw it, students saw it, leaders saw it too, and right there, I love that in our youth ministry we have college students who are youth leaders, but we also have like grandpas and grandmas. And so it's a wide range. And so some people, right when just seeing the topic, they're like, I want to meet with you. I have questions. I'm like, great. And they're like, I have political questions. Like, and I'm like, okay, great. Let's grab coffee. Like, let's get some coffee, because me showing them that in August till me teaching it in February, that also gives leaders and families time to prepare and figure all this stuff out. Because if you just walked in and then there was no announcement and it's like, guess what, y'all? Tonight we're talking about gender. It's like, well, it's a lot, right? And for a parent who's picking up that kid, it's like, what did you guys talk about tonight? And if they have no idea, it's like, what? Like, what's going on? And we just don't want to catch people off guard. It could be so much for them. And so we wanted to give them a heads up. And then we did leader trainings. So I already kind of talked about the hardest part in all of this, I truly believe, is not the message. Like the 15, 20-minute message at youth group, I don't think that's the hardest part. I truly think the hardest part is preparing the leaders to have the conversation. Because our message, for the most part, I mean, even if you're super interactive, it's essentially a 15 to 20-minute monologue where you talk, right? And people maybe tune out or they don't like it or whatever, but it's pretty like one way and it's pretty smooth. But the small group leaders in the room for an hour, that's when all chaos can break loose. That's when the conversation, somebody shares a story, now they have another huge question, and now it's like, oh, it can get out of hand pretty quick, honestly, and leaders can leave very discouraged if they feel like they're not equipped as well, if that makes sense. And so the leader training, I genuinely believe that's the hardest part, and it's so funny because when I taught on both of these things, the student we had in the back who was running tech for me, she would identify herself, or she would place herself in that like kind of queer community. And so she's looking at all of my slides, and I know the student, and so I'm like, hey, did you see my slides go in? She's like, yeah, I saw all of it. I'm like, great, what do you think? I don't agree with a lot of it. I'm like, okay. Hey, and this is what I said to her. I said, hey, okay, even if you don't agree with this, you're gonna need to like help me make sure that this goes smoothly. Can I trust you to do that? She's like, okay. I said, okay, thank you. And I'm like, hey, but we've already talked about this a little bit, and afterwards, if you wanna talk, let's talk. But you cannot like just black it out or anything, okay? She's like, okay. And then she's like, but I brought my flag. Like, she brought a flag. And I'm like, okay, what's happening here? She's like, well, when you go up there and you say something I don't like, I'm gonna be in the back and I'm gonna wave my flag so you know that I don't like it. I'm like, great, you're in the back of the room, it's kind of dark. Go ahead, wave the flag quietly. Okay, afterwards, let's talk. And so even with that, the chaos of that, like I still think the leader in the room, that's one of the hardest spaces. And so what do we do for them? We gave them some scripts. And so we literally wrote out things like stuff that we thought through. So question number 1, how should we respond if a student shares that they are struggling with gender dysphoria? And we scripted out the entire thing. We have it for them there. We have additional tips for gender stuff. And so we also made a leaders packet where we trained leaders and we gave them things to go through so that they could be prepared, not just theologically, but we wanted them to have the right framework in how to lead well. And so this is like a leader packet, a booklet that we go over in our trainings with leaders. And there's a few points here, and this stretched us so much because we were trying to be so sensitive and honestly so truthful that what came out of this leader training became essentially the template in how we train all of our leaders moving forward when it comes to any challenging conversation. And so our first point here is give students a safe space to process and share. And so we want it to be a non-judgmental space. Leaders, be vulnerable as it leads to more vulnerability. Don't make it about you. We don't want you as a leader to go into group time and then teach another sermon. Like, they don't need that. It's a space for students to open up and share and process because they got a lot of questions. Number 2, lead with clarity and compassion. And so we want to love and welcome every student, but at the same time, clarity is kindness. And so we don't shy away when we talk about sin or gender or sex or sexuality, his design, any of those things. Number 3, as disagreements and differences arise, unite under Jesus. We can't please everybody, and that's going to be totally fine. But we also want to tell them and pull them up to the greater story of what Jesus is doing. And even as I set up the series, so our series, as we were talking through this, I called it Wonderfully Made, kind of talking about the image of God. We talked about gender, sexuality, race, a whole bunch of other things. But my whole thing in the beginning was, if you walk away thinking, oh, I learned about gender and that's it, then like I have failed. Like, this should point to the greater and grander story of Jesus and the gospel, and people should see how awesome and beautiful his grace and love and design is for us. And so that's so huge. And we tell leaders, if you don't talk about Jesus every week, you have failed too, because what are we doing, right? Like, what are we talking about then if we're not talking about Jesus? And then number 4, shepherd every student. Each student is different, and so there's so many different stories, experiences, backgrounds, desires in these students, and so we do need to care for each student well. We tell leaders, you're not alone. It's another huge headline, right? And so even during this night, I had our staff take a more hands-off approach to just wander around, and I was just kind of I was just in the area. So I just kind of, like, if they're meeting in here and there's multiple groups, and I'm sure all of our churches or wherever we meet, we have like windows or something. So I'd walk around so they could see me. They just know that a leader is present. And on nights like this, leaders pulled me in and they're like, I don't know how to answer this question, like, biblically. I think I know the answer. A pastor once said this, but I don't want to give the wrong answer. And I was so happy, because we tell leaders all the time, I would rather you say, I don't know, than give them false theology. Like, just make it up because you don't want to seem like you don't know it. And I do that all the time still. Like, students still come up to me and they're like, what about this concept? And some of them are in like private, like Catholic school. And I'm like, dude, I forgot what I learned. Okay, just give me let me come back to you in like 1 week. Okay, and then let's talk about it. And so, like, we tell them, pull us in if you need, and then follow up, right? And so, like, some of the saddest stories that you'll hear is, man, I listen to so many podcasts and stuff, like, preparing for this, but like these conversations, and I think there are stories about students who finally muster up the courage to share about gender and sexuality. They bring it to their small group leader or their pastor, and then the response is almost like silence, because the pastor or small group leader is trying to figure it out, and they don't ever ask again. It's almost like if somebody brings up like pornography or whatever the thing is, and you don't know how to answer, so you're kind of frozen, and a student takes that silence as not being cared for at all, right? It's actually more painful that they opened up and then there's nothing. And so how are we following up is massive. And so every time a leader comes up to me or a student comes up to me, I always try to say, hey, thank you for sharing. How many people have you shared this with? Nobody. You're the first person I ever talked to about this. Nobody even knows about this. Thank you so much for trusting us and trusting the church to hear you talk about this. If it's a female student, immediately my next thing is, hey, which of your small group leaders do you feel the most comfortable talking to about this? What about mom or parents who, I don't know, I don't know about anybody. I totally get that. Hey, this is such an important thing. I want to make sure we care for you really well. I can't do that by myself. And so, hey, like, let's talk about who it is. Who do you feel closest to? Maybe this leader. Oh, that's awesome. Like, why this leader? Well, because at camp, I opened up to this leader and they're really caring. All right, that's so awesome. Hey, would you be willing, let's go over right now. Would you be willing to share a little bit? I can take the lead, or you can take the lead. I don't know. Yeah, I'm still not. And then as the conversation goes, it's like just building in the student courage and showing them, hey, I know you opened up to me and you think like you're done because you shared, but that's not how we're going to care well for you. And so whatever, and I've called, leaders have driven home almost. Like they're like, I just left church. I'm like, can you come back? Please, please come back. And they're like, oh, okay, everything okay? I'm like, please, yes, come back. And so, hey, Kyra, come back here. Hey, this girl in your small group just opened up and she said that she trusts you the most out of everybody. Dude, are you like, and yeah, totally, what's up? And then we share, and in that conversation, I'm like, hey, I'm so proud of you for sharing. Hey, we're gonna follow up with you about this, okay? I'm just letting you know, we're gonna reach out. Is that okay? Yeah, totally. Okay, great. Then next week, we're gonna continue to talk to you about this, all right? Okay, yeah. And so, man, that is so huge for we want to put that in leaders too, right? Hey, just because the night is over and the next week we're teaching about something else, that doesn't mean we just stop talking about it. And it's so easy for us to want to do it because it's not really easy to talk about at times. And so, we try to do all of this for leaders. The other thing we did is we did a training, and then we did multiple group times where we all got together. And so it was like we do like huddles before, right, where we gather to pray. And so we did it even like 30 minutes before that. And so then people came, and I remember so it'd be like, so we meet Wednesday night, so it'd be like the Wednesday before, hey, knowing that next week is gonna be gender, come early, and at 6 o'clock we'll give you guys dinner, and then we could talk about it, and you guys can throw out whatever questions kind of our processing space. And then at that one, I remember I had 2 very young leaders and like 2 or 3 very old leaders. Okay, it was like the 2 ends of the spectrum. And they were essentially struggling with seeing the other side. I don't know if that makes sense. Because the older leaders were like, I just don't get it. Why do we need to do it like this? And I'm like, okay, I'm so glad you're here because I don't want you to bring this energy into like group time. This is good. This is the right place. And then the young leaders were like, man, but I want to build a relationship. I want to, and I've already, and before we talked about it, they've said stuff like, I've already talked to them about how loving, and we've already used this language, and now I feel like I need to go back and kind of correct, and I'm like, this is so awesome. And so I was like, these 2 groups and camps actually kind of need each other. So then it went into like, hey, why do you hold to what you hold to? And why do you hold to what you hold to? And even just them talking that out helped for the other side get like, oh, okay, like that is what your generation or your pocket actually grew up with. And it actually softened both sides, maybe complemented both sides is a better term. So that was actually really, I was like so glad that, and they just kind of taught each other. I was like, this is great, you guys just talk. And so it was awesome. And then, so all of these resources, super helpful for us. I have like a calendar of our teaching stuff. I should have organized this a little bit more, but it's all coming together. Okay, and then up here last, I have my talks. So I did one on gender. I'm a full manuscripter, so I printed out the whole talk. I don't know if anybody cares or wants it. I have it. And then for sexuality, because we've actually hit this several times, we brought in a guest. He wrote a book on this. His name is Beckett Cook. He's done a lot of great stuff, and so I brought him in for an interview. And so this is my manuscript to set up his story. I don't know if that makes sense. So we did all that. That's what that night looked like. The teaching part was, again, probably one of the easier parts. So we had all that. And then, okay, teaching followed by feedback, additional care, follow-up for students. Yes, I talked about that. Okay, continue. So then, after the teaching, we move on to the next series, right? And I think I realized that as we did that, it almost felt like, I think all the leaders were like, oh, we did it. Like, we finished the series, and we're like, okay, what's our next series? And it was like, I don't know, like Proverbs or something, right? They're like, okay, good, just good old the Bible, right? Like, this good stuff. And so we're going through it again. And as we're going through it, still, there would be pockets of leaders, and they would come up or message us, and they'd be like, man, we're in Proverbs. But then the student asked again about something. And I'm like, yeah, that's gonna happen, because small group time sometimes, man, I love teaching, and it's so important to preach the gospel and to talk to them about Jesus and all this good stuff. But also we know that some of the best small group times also get completely derailed, right? It just happens. Whatever's happening in their lives, as the Spirit leads, totally fine. And so they came in, but then that week, they had another conversation. They had another thing going on, and that becomes a thing. And so then leaders kept saying oh man, I thought we're done. And I'm like, well, no, that's kind of not the right attitude. We built the foundation. We're going to keep talking about it probably. And they didn't really want to talk about it, but we kind of had to. We needed to. And honestly, as a teacher, I also, if I could confess, I also kind of wanted to move on, because it's hard to keep talking about it, and there's so many different scenarios and nuances of everything. And so even me, there'd be weeks where I'm man, when I teach on identity, or when I teach about relationships, or I teach about worldview, I'm like, man, I think I need to talk about this again. It's been a few weeks, or it's been a few months. I think I need to mention it again. And every time I do it, there are questions, and it comes up again and again. But I do think it's so important. It's not just coming up with it, training and doing it, and you finally muster up the strength to teach on it, and then now it's weaving into your regular rhythms as you talk about all of these things, right? So just we talk about identity, worth, anxiety, depression, loneliness, as we talk about all of these things, pornography constantly, right? Dating, friendships, this is just another thing that we're going to be just regularly talking about. Busyness, it's another one of these things. And so to be continued is kind of there's just a lot more, right? And even recently, we do this series every year now, and so it's so fun, right? For our church, I know we're kind of gearing up for it, but every January, February, we do a series called On the Table, and at your church you might have some version of that, right? You have your own cool title or whatever, but we always talk about sexuality is a huge one. We typically talk about gender still year after year in these, and very recently, it's just March, right? And so we talk about sex a few times a year, but I usually give a sex talk, and I've gone pretty detailed in it, and I only do that because of all the feedback that I get from students. So I'll talk to guys who play on football teams or lacrosse teams or whatever, right? And I'm I see what they post. Sometimes I follow them, right? Or sometimes other students will show me what other students are posting. Did you see this? I'm I didn't see that. Thank you for telling me. And they're ratting each other out, kind of. And so they'll say stuff, and then I'll meet up with students, and I'm hey, I saw you. Were you at a party or something? Or what was this thing? Oh yeah. Well, we're just to go have fun. Oh, cool. So I saw you post with this girl a few times. What's the deal? Do you like her or something? Oh, I don't know, something like that. Okay. Hey. We're talking about purity. We're talking about being good witnesses, following Jesus. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So we also talk about how far you go. This will be me one-on-one with a high school senior or whatever, right? So, dude, what's going on, man? I don't need the details, but are you walking in purity? I just have to ask you that, right? Oh, yeah, I think so. All right, what do you mean by that? And then he'll start asking me really specific questions. And he'll be so can we do this? And I'm whoa, no. Why did you even ask that? Oh, because it's not that. Okay, well, what about this? No, that's even worse than the thing you said before. So then we keep going, And so there was one year last year, I actually made a chart about how far you can go and bases and stuff. Not because I think it'd be so fun to make a chart about sex, because multiple students have asked me, can I do this in the car? Can I do this? And I'm like, no, like you cannot do that. Sexual immorality, right? Or lust, right? And so so we'll go through the whole thing. And so I found that getting really practical, I know it's not fun to talk about, and it's like, I even had to take words off of my PowerPoint because I was like, I don't want students taking pictures of that, and like, I don't know, it could feel really weird to like be that explicit, if that makes sense. I want to like communicate that, but shared all that with students, and I asked them after. I was like, hey, how was the conversation? Like, was it helpful? Because my whole thing is like, I don't care about I just want it to be helpful for them. Like, I want them to be able to practically live in a manner worthy of the gospel. And so, hey, was this helpful for you guys? And they were like, yeah, I actually think that was like some of the best like teachings we've ever had. You know? But also students get really excited when you talk about sex in a weird kind of, they just want to hear about it. I don't know, they have so many questions, right? And so they kind of love talking about it, but I do hope that it was really helpful, and that was some of the feedback I got. And so the more practical we're able to be, even when we talk about pronouns. And so I'm not teaching you exactly how to teach it, but I'm just saying the alignment, the preparation, the letting people know, the caring, the follow-up, all that is so helpful. And I still have students, I'll tell you two more stories, because I actually think stories are so helpful because it's so nuanced, all the scenarios, that it hopefully puts some like legs on what I'm talking about. I talked with a student after I gave the sexuality talk. He came up to me and he was like, hey, I need to like confess something. I'm like, yeah, totally, what's up, dude? He's like, what about my desires? What if I have a desire for something, but I'm not living it out? Or like, I don't want to do something sinful, like, but I have these like feelings. I'm like, okay, can we be a little bit more specific? Because I don't know exactly what you're talking about. He's like, well, I'm bisexual. I wrestle, but I'm not, like, I don't want to date another dude, or like, I don't want to do that. And like, but I want to like honor God, and I don't know how to do this. I'm like, dude, that is awesome that you're talking to me about this, and that you have the heart to like want to honor and please Jesus. Like, that is beautiful, dude. Who have you talked to? Nobody. I've never talked to anybody about this. That's so awesome, man. I'm so glad you're here. Man, what was your name again? You're a freshman here. Dude, thank you for opening up and sharing. How's your small group? Great. I love my leaders so much. I look up to them so much. That's so great. Dude, would you be willing to talk to one of your leaders about it? Yeah, of course, but like, I already talked to you about it. Totally, but man, they're with you week in and week out, and they're always here. Man, like, I think it'd be so great if you could do that. Yeah, oh yeah. And that student still comes back every week. Every week he's still in our group, and I love that he's here with us. And so, man, like, I love having conversations like that where students can finally open up and share. And it's not, I don't want to be like the pastor or the leader who's holding on to all the information of everybody. Like, it's too much pressure, right? It's so much. And so I'm, as much as I can, like, trying to pull other leaders into it, and they know that too. And then I talked to a student who, we just had a big conference at our church, a high school conference, and then we had a whole bunch of students put their faith in Jesus for the first time, which is beautiful to see. And so God did that, and I'm following up with these students who, we call them I Believe services, because students stand up and say I believe. And so I'm meeting with, actually on that day I saw this girl like just weeping. She couldn't, like, after service, she didn't get up, she was just weeping. And I went over and I'm like, hey, is everything okay? Like, what's going on? And she's like, I'm just so overwhelmed by God. Like, I've been serving, I've been doing all this stuff, but I finally like believe. And I'm like, that is beautiful, I love that. And she's with another student. I'm like, man, that's so great. And after they have that moment, we have them come up, and the elders of our church pray. And so I was like, hey, did you go up and get prayer? And like, that's also where we like get their contact information so we can follow up. It's like, we need the data, you know what I'm talking about. So it's like, we need you to do that, and we have a gift for you. I want you to do all that. And she's like, no, I just, during the response time, I couldn't get up. So I've been just weeping here. I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally get that. But her friend was right there, and I'm like, she's a great student leader. I'm like, hey, since she didn't get up, I was like, hey, student leader, Michaela, come over here. Hey, your friend just put her faith in Jesus for the first time. She's like, I know, it's awesome. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, hey, but she didn't go to get prayed for. Would you mind praying for her? She's like, yeah. And earlier that the week before, that student, because she knows her story, she kind of gave me a little bit of her friend's story, if that makes sense. So she was kind of like, hey, my friend's been coming here, but I know a lot has happened in her life. And so I'm like, man, you can pray for her better. She's a student leader, she can do it. And I'm like, you pray for her, she prayed for her. And then I found out the student's story. A lot of stuff going on in her story. Separation, abuse, homelessness, bullying, anxiety, depression, suicidal idea. Almost like she literally in her story was like, whatever you could think of that has happened to a student probably happened to me, like everything. And I'm like, wow. And so she shared her whole story with me. Like she lived a lot of life for a 16, 17-year-old. All that. And then at the end she says, I have one more thing, but I'm really scared to talk to you about it. I said, what is it? She's like, I don't know where you stand on like gender sexuality stuff. And I'm like, would you mind? I mean, you already opened up to me about a lot of stuff. What, like, would you be willing to try? She's like, totally, I'm willing to talk about it. I just don't know how you're gonna react. And I'm like, go for it. And so she's like, yeah, she talked about, I didn't feel comfortable being a girl, all the stereotypes, I didn't feel like I fit in. And then she was also adopted, so a lot of layers in the story, but eventually she's like, man, but like I wrestled with gender for so long, I didn't know who to talk to, but I kept coming to church because I love serving and I love being a part of a group, but I also couldn't figure out faith, and so like, but I kept coming out because whatever we're doing here seems different than like when I go to school, and it just feels different here, and so I liked it, so I kept coming out. I'm like, that's awesome. And then she's like, yeah, but she's like, it's so weird because it was such a big deal to me. Like, she's like, it was so important to me, like the gender and sexuality. She's like, I identify as queer. Like, it was so big. But then she's like, I don't know why in the last few months as I kept coming to church and serving, it just kept like, it became not as important. And I'm like, interesting, why do you think that? And she's like, well, as I'm just here and hearing about like my identity and worth and my value and who I am, she's like, I'm just realizing that like my main identity is not like that anymore, and it almost doesn't matter as much. And I'm like, okay, what's the identity that matters the most? She's like, just that I'm like love, like that God loves me, and that's like the most important thing. And I'm like, man, as you're sharing, I'm like, it reminds me of the Galatians 3 passage where it's like, neither male or female, Gentile or slave, but all are one in Christ Jesus. Like, my identity is Christ and nothing else. And I was like, hey, that as you were talking about that verse kind of came to mind. Like, have you heard that before? She's like, no, but I resonate so deeply with that idea, the idea in that verse, that ultimately my identity is in Christ and it's not those other things. And so she's like, it was such a big deal, but now it kind of doesn't really matter anymore. And she's like, no, I totally... And I got to explain with her and share kind of where we stand as a church, and she's like, I totally resonate and agree with that. And so, man, I know it's hard to prepare as a leader, as kind of the adult leader talking about some of these conversations, but as we do, I think it's a massive gift to students. The more we can practice and think through and articulate and do all this, not alone, but with our volunteer team or with our staff teams, I think it's so helpful. The more heads up, the more aligned we can be with our leadership. Now we're not stepping outside or going too far, if you kind of know what I'm saying. Like, leadership is like, no, I know you're going to talk about it. They can be prepared to, not just for like, oh, like we're scared of what people are going to say, but be prepared to care well for students and families. And then as you do share, it's ongoing, because students are going to continue to wrestle with this as our leaders. Even as you interview leaders and bring on volunteers, like, this is just going to be something we constantly talk about. But then God is also using this opportunity. Some of the hardest conversations I've ever had in ministry turned out to be some of the moments where really God shows up the most, right? And it's like, it's so good for us to our own faith to be praying like, God, I don't know if I can have this conversation. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't know how it's going to go. That's where God really works, not just in their lives, but in our lives. But then when we bring it and we get to articulate some of these things, they're able to see, wow, this isn't just like the church's stance on this thing or your stance on this, but this is the picture of what God is painting and what he's doing, that marriage points to something, sex points to something, gender talks about our image, and it's all about God and His glory. And so it's actually a beautiful and wonderful opportunity for us to get to conversations about Jesus, identity, worth, relationships, value, all of it. And so, yeah, that's all I got, y'all. It's only 2 o'clock right now. Oh my gosh. But maybe we can do like Q&A if you guys have questions. Is that right? Or then maybe I can give you the gift of time and you can leave early too if you want. I don't know, however you want to do this. But okay, as I go through this, the first is always the hardest, but, or maybe even like, you're like, you talked about a lot of stuff, but you didn't actually talk about whatever this is. Like maybe you already have a question. Yeah, does anybody have something or feedback, criticism, whatever you want to say at me or for the room? Yeah.
So you talked a lot about like staff and then your coworkers. Did you do anything with parents beforehand or anything like that? Provide resources that way too?
That's great. What was your name?
Elijah.
Elijah. Okay. So for the recording, do we have resources for parents and things like that? What do we do for parents? All of the leader stuff we actually sent out to parents, so they got to see what our leaders are going through and how it'll end up. What helped a lot though is as we taught our series, we actually trailed the weekend service. So when we met on Wednesday, so it'd be like gender, and then on the weekend, and then the Wednesday after, then we talk about gender or sexuality. And so parents, that helped a lot for them because they got to hear from our senior pastor exactly where we land, and then I got to echo some of that from a different angle a little bit, right? And so that was so helpful. And then afterwards, we did a seminar. We did a few different ones, a few different iterations. So one of the years we had a 4-week thing where one of the pastors at our church is Doug Fields, and I mean he's done a lot of youth ministry stuff, and so he came in and did something with the parents to talk about gender and sexuality, and man, so many parents showed up and shared like he stayed in the room probably for like an hour after each time, just hearing parents share stories, and some very heartbreaking stories, to be really blunt about it, about how they didn't know how to have the conversation when their kid finally came out. They probably reacted in the way opposite to what they actually, like all that, kind of came out. And then we also invited not just high school parents and junior high parents, but there were some even elementary age parents. We were just telling them like, hey, this is good for you to start thinking about and having the conversation about. It's just going to come up sooner than you think oftentimes. And so we did one iteration of that at one point, and had additional like books and resources in the back so they could kind of dive deeper into some of the conversations, or some of them going in knew like, oh, I know my child has already talked to me about like this thing. I don't know how to answer this kind of question, right? Or this kind of thing. And so then we would talk them through like, hey, this book was really helpful in that. You should, like resourcing them appropriately. And then we had another iteration where we just talked about how do you talk to your kids about sex. And it was like how to have sex talks and how to talk about pornography and all these things too. And so coming out of it, so it would be like weekend message on sex, Wednesday youth group message on sex, and then the following weekend is when we would start those classes. So it'd be like, you just heard about it, next weekend if you want to stay after, we'll have a seminar in this room, come get lunch, it's a 3-week thing or something like that, or sometimes we'd stack it on a Wednesday night. And so hopefully that's kind of helpful. Yeah, parent, seminar plus books and resources. That's a great question though. Anybody else? Questions? Yeah?
Yeah, well, you shared so many stories that where the conversation really ended pretty beautifully in terms of the students. I'm curious if you had any conversations where it just, you could tell it wasn't going well, either like the student just couldn't understand or they just held such a defiant stance against it, and you feel like it's kind of going down a downward trajectory. How do you deal with those questions, especially as it relates to them maybe not even wanting to come to church anymore, this is leaving a bad impression on them and stuff like that?
That is a great question. Man, I'm kind of, I wish you didn't ask that, because I was trying to give you the positive, uplifting stories of encouragement. Just kidding. No, that's so good, because Okay, so we had, I have a few stories, more than one. I might have more, or maybe as many of these stories as like somebody put their faith in Jesus, right? That's beautiful too. But we had a life group that was predominantly in the LGBT community. So most of the students in one of these groups were like the minority were Christians in that group, which is a really challenging thing to lead as small group leaders, right? You're like, oh man, this is like it's a tougher group. And so they knew that this was coming, and they had an idea that these topics were being said, and they have a very clear idea also of where we stood. Some students have even come up to us because there was historically too, this is a little tangential, but at Mariners, we had a case go all the way up to the Supreme Court about same-sex stuff, and that was like if you Google like Mariners Church same-sex Supreme Court, like it'll come up as like, and so people kind of knew about it, like just where we are, right? And so they know that we stand to a traditional biblical view of gender and sexuality, and so these students had all of that in mind, and during this series, it was really hard for them, and a lot of like pre-conversations had to happen going into it, especially when, like, I think there were 2 students, and this is true about anything, there were a few students, specifically in this group too, that were very vocal, and if they get fired up, like, they'll shift the whole dynamic of the group, or they'll like leave. Like, students in this group would run away, and we would have to like find them. Like, it was very confusing actually, because okay, so one time, one of the students ran away, and that student in that moment identified as they, them. So then we called the security team, and it got really confusing, because we're like, they ran away. Like, one of the leaders, they ran away. How many are there? Just the one, right? And so, anyway, we found that student, okay. And so a lot was going on there. There was like behavioral, there was like just staying on track, right? There's all that. But when we went through all that, so they were a senior group, and on top of that, so a lot of them were like kind of figuring out, man, is church really the right place for me? Do I continue walking? Some of them were actually, they were looking for a church that was more affirming than us. That's what it really came down to. And I think they loved their life group leaders, and they loved some things about our church. That's why they kept coming out. But for them, this is not true for everybody, but for them, they wanted to go to a church that would essentially give the stamp of approval for whatever they wanted. And when they officially found out that we were not going to do that, they were really disappointed in us, and they were sad to leave. And then they eventually, kind of as a friend group, went to go look for another church that was going to fit their convictions, right? And so, and what we did was we talked to parents, talked to them, and do our best to still be there for them through all of it, and have the conversations. But it's so interesting. Another student, he came up to me once and he said, hey, thanks for all these talks about all this stuff. Like, it's so weird because when you start talking about it, people are like, you're the guy that talks about gender and sex. And I'm like, I do other stuff than that, but yes, I do that too. And then he'll come up to me and he's like, hey, I want to start a gay Christian club at my school. And I'm like, I need to hear more about what you're talking about here. What are you talking about? And he's like, I watched all this stuff. I get where you're coming from, but I also want to start a club for people, like a affirming club kind of at my school for this. And I was like, can I ask, like, man, how did you, like, why do you have the convictions you have? Like, can we talk about it? And I was like, and I'm a pastor, like, I'm going to just show my hand. A lot of what I talk about is going to be from the Bible. So, like, do you have, like, also, like, verses and stuff? I would love to walk you through some of this if you're open. And so we met twice, but we met once where he got to tell me all of his convictions. Hey, there's these 3 passages. And he literally was like, I watched these like YouTube videos with my family. Like we listen to other like affirming churches teach through this. And these are the 3 verses they use. So he gave me those 3 verses. And I'm like, okay, totally. hey, I'm going to let you go first, and you share with me because I want to learn. And then the next time we meet, I would love to also share with you why we stand where we stand. So I met with the student, 1 hour just listening to, I would say, liberal theology and hermeneutics, right? And then I was like, awesome, dude, thank you for sharing all this. I love that you're using some of these passages, because I would love to talk to you about some of the passages you've used. I have a conviction a different way, but I love that we're kind of trying to figure out what God's word says. And the next meeting, try to reach out, just ghosted, just gone. And there has been some level of that from where and this is not true for all, but like that, those examples are kind of like, I think people are looking for something, and when they realize, oh, I'm not going to get the leaders to change their minds on how they interpret, then I don't know if this is really going to be a place for me. But then the student that I kind of shared about, who's in the back of the room flag, she stayed all the way through group. She was very upset that night for that series. And we knew that she was going to be upset, and we talked to her too, like, hey, you can share and process in this group. This is the place for it, but we need to be respectful, because there's other people in the group, and some people like have a very different view than you. And so we're just going to be respectful. Like, you can't dominate the conversation. We want participation from we're doing all that stuff. And we got through those series with her, and she gets where we land, and she still comes out to our church. She still is in that community, I would say. She moved away for school, and she still comes back when she comes back on break, and she'll still come to church, and she'll still say hi, and we still chat. And I think still doesn't like that our church holds to that, but she's still kind of figuring it out, and I think she's still on that journey to figure out some of that stuff too. And so it has been really rough for some of the leaders, to the point where we've even had to meet with leaders who lead some of those groups. Honestly, for dude, I don't want you to burn out from serving after this year. Can you stay with us a little longer? You've been caring for this group. It can be very taxing for the life group leaders who are on this multi-year journey with a student who's very maybe opinionated. It could be hard to lead, and so caring for that leader as well is something that we've noticed. Oh man, we got to show some extra love to some of these people. So yeah, those are just some of the stories. Yeah, I hope that's kind of what you're looking for. Yeah.
I don't know if this relates specifically to gender and sexuality. Maybe it's kind of a broader subject. But how would you recommend going about leader training at a smaller church that maybe doesn't have the level of infrastructure that it sounds like the church has?
Yeah, I think some of these steps can be taken, and because I've shared some of this to people, and I think they were just curious about what we do, and then they're like, oh, I can't do that. So what can I do? And I hope it's seeing some of the other reasons, because there's churches I think that were ahead of us for sure, and I got to kind of look and glean to see not just where they land, but how they did things. And so I think a conversation with leadership is helpful, right? I think still finding a few books, 1 or 2 books that was pivotal for you, could be really helpful for resourcing, right? If you can bring in some of these other things, even a list of counselors we have too as resources, instead of bringing somebody in. A leader training, it could be, get some Chick-fil-A, or I don't know, get some food for the leaders, and then you just, I actually did a part where I got 1 week ahead. I've done this before. I've gotten 1 week ahead, and I've given them my outline. And so, hey, I'm just going to talk you through my outline. And so this is not the whole talk, so it's going to be better than this, I hope. But let me just give you my outline on this talk. And I almost use that as the training, right? And so, there's, I think, other ways that you can have, it might not be documents, but it just might be conversations. And I think that goes a long way too, just thinking about all the different, when I think about caring for students well, I think about, me as the pastor leader, I'm one like avenue, but there's also parent leadership, counseling, right? Like there's so many other like things that they can dive into, and if I could have maybe even one thing for each of those categories, like that's a parent actually feels supported in those times when they're like, oh, like you've thought about this, you can point me to a book, or you have a counselor that that you kind of trust and know, like thank you, you know, like maybe you haven't solved it for them, but you're kind of like giving them in some ways the next step of what they need. And so I found that to be kind of helpful. I hope that kind of answers your question. Yeah. Totally. Yes.
For like content specifically,
Yeah.
like how have you like navigated the like shame honor in like these topics, and like at what level of discernment do you like bring in parents to the conversation with that in mind?
Yeah, it's so nuanced because in some ways it's a little bit case by case, depending on, it all depends on how much trust and communication that student has with the parent, right? And that makes it either really easy or really difficult. And there's some students who they feel like if they talk to their parent about this, it's the end of the world, right? Like my entire world is gonna crash down. It is like, oh, it's over, everything's over. And I would say the same is true when I have conversations with students about sometimes like depression or like suicidal ideation. Like they don't want their parents to know too. Like and it's just like, it's the idea, I think, with honor shame stuff of either they have this expectation or their parent has an expectation of what they should be like, and they know that adding or sharing about this would like shatter that, right? It's such a big deal, like it'll do a lot of damage. And so much of this is coaching up the student to ideally have the conversation. So that's my like top priority in something like this. Hey, what you shared with us is so important. It is so it's not just so important because I'm saying it's so important. This is so important to you, right? Like I know this is a huge part of what you're wrestling with right now. We can care for you as a church. We have these resources. We have leaders. Like you can talk to us about it. But if they're still really hesitant in sharing with the parent, I'll do my best to absolutely coach them up and dispel any false narrative they have. So that they might say things like, my parents aren't going to care for me anymore. Like this is going to break their hearts. And I'm going to say, it might be hard for them to receive, but they absolutely love you. Like I'm putting the best, like it's so easy, like they're almost spiraling. Like I've spiraled in a lot of things, and I need somebody to be like, no, some of that stuff is not even true, you know? Like, and we need to be like, yeah, this is going to be a hard conversation. We're going to coach you into how to have the conversation. Your parents love you. I guarantee you, your parents love you. Even though this is hard, they might even react wrong, but like show them grace. Like imagine like somebody give you big news. It might be really hard for you to take it, right? Yeah, it might be really hard for me. Okay, and so we'll try to encourage them to do it. But even if they're at the point where they're like, okay, I know you want me to talk to my mom or my dad, I just cannot do it. Like there's no way I can have this conversation. Then we'll say to them, okay, that's fine. Would you be willing for us to have the conversation with you? Would that be helpful? And for some of them, they're like, yeah. Like I'd rather you break the news and I just sit there like quietly than like I don't even know if I can say it. And so we're like, okay, but we want your parents to know. And so for the most part, unless we had a case where a student was on the brink of ending their own life and wrestling with some of these things, and that was a really tricky thing to navigate because it was like we had to talk about mental health stuff before we could get to this conversation, if that makes sense. But we do want the parent, because we believe so much in the partnership of parents, it's like we want you to do it by yourself, build confidence. If it's hard for you, we'll have the conversation with you. If that can't happen either, hey, like just so you know, this is so important. Like we actually want to talk to your parents about that. Would you be open to us doing that? And usually when we say something like that, like, oh man, it's gonna happen anyway, and like oftentimes they'll either want us to dive in or we'll have it with them. But we've rarely had to call parents and say, because we don't want to break that, but we just want to keep, we're not necessarily forcing them to do it, but we're just telling them, this is so important, like, we almost want to do it. Like, we know this is for you to share, and this is your story to tell, but, like, this is so important that, like, we almost have the heart to want to do that. We just want your parents to know so bad. Like, they should be getting that sense, and we're going to keep talking to them about it until they kind of do, yeah, just to honor the parents. Yeah, just to honor the parents. So that's typically what it looked like. Any other questions? Hopefully that was helpful in clarifying. Yeah.
I know this is like a basic question to ask, but when on the topic of gender and sexuality, when do you think is an appropriate age to begin having these conversations? And I know that that's different from a parent to child, but as youth ministry leaders, like around what age would that be an appropriate time to like, hey, like parents, we want to start talking about this? Because it also seems like within culture, that age is getting younger and younger, where they're getting introduced to these subjects.
Totally. I think a conversation with like leadership about this is super helpful in the church context, but also like kids ministry people and junior high. So, I mean, if you're doing both, then you're like, you kind of get it. But yeah, at Mariners, like we do talk to, at our parent breakout to talk about sex and gender and all this. We said, hey, you can start talking to your kids about like body part names early on, right? What's appropriate, what's not appropriate really early on. Hey, nobody touches, like, I mean, I have a daughter and we tell her like, instead of the cute names, because it could be very friendly, if that makes sense. We'll say we'll just say, be like, hey, this is your vagina. Like, nobody touches this, okay? Only mommy and daddy for like helping you wash, and that's it. Nobody touches you. Okay, if somebody touches you here, like you have to tell us. You know, like nobody does that. You know, and so like we tell her she's 3 years old, and so we're comfortable just naming parts initially. And I think for sex, man, like puberty is getting younger from what I read and stuff too. And so like I know in our kids ministry we begin to like sprinkle some of it in. We don't go into much detail. But definitely by junior high age, like we're talking about sex and porn and all that stuff just because of the data. Like we don't want to be behind, like so far behind, right? And so like we don't want porn teaching our kids more about sex than we are, right? Because it's easier to teach initially than to reteach. So we do want to be ahead of it if we can, yeah. But we also want to protect their innocence. It's I'm sure some of this is cultural and yeah, all that stuff too. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm just gonna just piggyback off because I know that statistically, by the time you're like in third grade, 80% of boys could be exposed to porn on the internet because that's when the schools are starting to use more
Yeah.
research and things like that. So when you said junior high, I was like, oh, I feel like that's so late.
It's totally.
Yeah, the earlier you go, I think the better. I have a son, and so I want them to know as much as they can. I think it's important here.
That's so good. Thank you for saying that. I completely agree. All right. Yes.
For the younger junior high, like teenagers, I teach in junior high school. So obviously, like, schools teach children openly about different genders and identities and things like that. And I've come across some Christian students, like in 7th grade, they learn from church like homosexuality is sin. And it's for them because they're still young, they're very black and white when it comes to right and wrong. And they'll openly accuse another friend of being gay or whatever, and they get into trouble because of that. And they're not as diplomatic or as gracious in their conversation with their friends.
Not at all.
So how do we as teachers at church teach students to be understanding but also be able to stand their ground?
That's a really great question. You're talking about kind of the joking side of it. Is that?
Joking side. I think one particular student was very serious. She was very confident about what she believed in, and she learned from church that homosexuality is sin. And students these days, they are asked which subject you identify with, and You're almost like encouraged to kind of explore and see what you really identify yourself. You think you're female, but you may not be.
Totally.
You might be, you know, and she, I think, stood her ground and she almost like attacked another student
Yes.
verbally.
I hear you.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so how do we care for, or how do we help students navigate by being clear with what they believe, and having their convictions, but also being compassionate towards others? I think it does, like some of the leader training that we've done with just leaders, I've realized that we've had to even trickle in some of that conversation into the student space. And I would tell them, hey, this is what we went over with your leaders. We told them about this, and then I would even give them scripts and stories to help paint, like, hey, if somebody, like, I would even say it, hey, so what does it look like to hold to conviction and to be very loving, just like Jesus, full of grace and truth, not 50-50, 100% both? I think it could look something like this. If a friend comes up to you and asks this, and you have these beliefs, well, instead of leading with judgment or whatever, like almost helping them have different stories like that. And I think more than one is really helpful too, right? And so like if you could, if students wrestle with that, that's something that I would definitely follow up on. But I think sometimes they don't have the script and they don't have the practical, but then once we give it to them, they have the theory in their mind and they just don't know how to like do it, right? But giving them the language, all of that is so helpful. The tone, showing them like how you would have the conversation. I know that's been helpful for students in group. I think students have asked that before, and the leader would say something like, oh, I would put it like this, or I've said something like this before, and then the student's like, oh, okay, like, that's how you do it, kind of thing, right? And then they're like, okay, ooh, I was a little, had my little Pharisee hat on, and I was being a little mean about it, but now, I need to be very compassionate also. And so hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, giving them the scripts and stories. It did take a lot, because we've scripted some stuff out here, and like I would write the wrong word or say it the wrong way, and I'm like, ooh, I didn't mean to. I just sometimes don't know all of it, and so getting multiple people to look through or to talk to somebody that really knows that space too can be very helpful. Yeah, for language and how you talk about it. But, yeah. Good. All right. Awesome. Well, I have all these things. Would it be helpful is anybody actually interested in like getting digital files of all the stuff you can't even see? Okay, maybe then, I don't know, on the back of this, like write your info down. We have pens here somewhere, Alex, right? So, I don't know. Sorry, this is not your job. But maybe we could do this after. But maybe let me pray for us, and then if you have questions, I'm happy to chat, or then you can write some info down, and I'll get to it, okay? God, we thank you so much. I thank you for the room of leaders here, God, who it's not just a talk that we want to prepare for, it's students that we want to care for and shepherd and lead to you, Jesus. And so whatever we need, God, whether it be sensitivity or the theology or the practicals, God, equip us and give us these things so we can just care for your sheep well. God, we want to point students to you, but we also want to be honoring to our leadership, and we want to do this with volunteer leaders who don't get burnt out or be thrown off, God, as we talk about some of these things. And so help us to be holistic in how we think, and help us to be comprehensive in how we care for a student. And so, God, be with us. Help us to walk this, in some ways it feels like at times a razor's edge of truth and grace and truth and love, God, but Jesus, it just drives us back to you because you're full of both. And so, Jesus, help us in all this. Spirit, lead us. Help us to be so sensitive and caring, but also so bold and courageous and convicted too. God, we thank you for this time. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you.